The episode begins with where we left Loki, at the botched time heist in Avengers Endgame, as we watch him escape with the Tesseract. He's teleported to the Gobi Desert in Mongolia, and in a moment that is very befitting of who Loki is at this time, he finds the highest point in close proximity and begins to talk down to the people. I am Loki of Asgard, and I am burdened with glorious purpose. And it is that glorious purpose which will play into not only this episode, but possibly the series as a whole. An orange doorway appears and the TVA Minutemen pop out, led by Hunter B-15. Hunters in the show appear to be taking the place of the Justices who led the Minutemen in the comics. B-15 hits Loki with her staff, and that makes him move at 1/16 speed, but feel all the pain in real time. It is a very effective gag while also showing us how formidable the TVA is. She slaps a collar on Loki and tells the Minutemen to plant a reset charge before they step through the portal into the TVA headquarters. We never see what exactly the charge does, though. We are then taken to what appears to be a lobby of the TVA, colored in painfully dull orange and brown, to evoke a sense of uneasiness and mundanity. We see a Skrull variant there who is also apprehended by a TVA agent. Loki attempts to escape, but B-15 uses a device called the Time Twister, which transports him back to where he started. In the comic, the Time Twisters were created by He Who Remains, the last director of the TVA, before he created the Timekeepers. They are beings that were supposed to oversee the universe and pass information they learned into the next cycle, but they were flawed, so they went backwards in time instead, leading to the creation of the Timekeepers. Hunter B-15 asks the guy at the desk to log the Tesseract into evidence, and when Loki calls it the Tesseract, this guy says, "Sounds dumb," which might be my favorite line of the episode. Loki is pushed through these elevator-like doors, and he begins being processed. These scenes not only show us the bureaucratic nature of the TVA, but also gives us a lot of wonderful moments of hilarity and confusion, courtesy of Tom Hiddleston, including a moment where he wonders if he may or may not be a robot without knowing it. He's stripped by a robot, signs a stack of papers that's supposed to be everything he said, and has his temporal aura taken, with Loki constantly asking the phrase, "What's that mean?" After the elevator-like rooms, he enters a waiting room of sorts with a ticket machine. A Minuteman tells Loki and a snobby brat type who is also in custody to take a ticket. The D-bag does not take a ticket, and Loki reluctantly takes his. We are then given the history of the TVA on monitors in the room, presented by Miss Minutes, who is voiced by the legendary voice actress Tara Strong. She explains that there was a multiverse war, where countless unique universes battled for supremacy and nearly ended everything, until the Timekeepers appeared and merged all of the multiverse into the sacred timeline. They created the TVA and all of its employees to protect the sacred timeline. People who veer off the course of the sacred timeline in even the smallest ways as being late for work are considered variants and are taken into custody by the TVA to be judged. Nexus events are events that go against the predestined path of the sacred timeline, and if left unchecked can branch off into madness and could lead to another multiversal war. Now, this sentence right here is very important on so many levels. It teases Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness by basically saying the title of the movie, but it also refers to Nexus events, which is a callback to the Nexus commercial in WandaVision that tells us Wanda is a Nexus being, like in the comics, which makes her insanely powerful and capable of altering the flow of the universal time stream. And finally, it teases the Secret Wars, which was a comic book event that saw the different universes come into conflict with one another. When the D-bag brat is asked for his ticket by a Minuteman and does not have one, the Minuteman who asked him takes his baton and appears to erase or reset him. The batons look to be mini versions of the retroactive canon, or retcan, from the comics. We are then introduced to Agent Mobius, who is investigating the murder of a TVA hunter and his Minutemen in 1549 France. They were responding to a potential Nexus event and were ambushed, with their reset charges being taken. We learn that this attack was the 6th this week, and this scene gives off a very Seven/Zodiac kind of vibe. They are interrupted by a little girl running through the church, and Mobius goes to talk to her. We learn that all members of the TVA speak all languages in the timeline. Mobius asks her who did this, and she points to a stained glass window of the devil. So obviously this confirms 100% that it's not Mephisto. Sorry guys, the creator and the writer already nixed that idea. She possibly means that it was someone who had horns, or maybe a horned helmet. Her mouth is blue, and when asked about it, she hands Mobius a pack of gum the killer gave to her, and he asks the hunter who is with him to have it scanned to see when it's from, even though they know it won't work. I have a strong feeling that this pack of gum is going to come back into play later on. I don't know why, but they hover on it for a nice amount of time, and there's a shot of it in the end credits. Plus, the name Kablooey just makes it seem suspect. I think the killer left the gum behind with the intention of it being brought to TVA evidence. Mobius is told the branch is nearing Redline and tells the girl somberly to wait outside as they are about to activate another reset charge. Loki is brought to the time court, and as he walks to the stand, he passes by paintings of what looks like the different rankings of the TVA, including judges who have red sashes, what appears to be chronomonitors, analysts, and agents, and finally one with hunters and Minutemen. The judge presiding over Loki, who is not named on the show yet, but we know from the cast list, is Ravonna Renslayer, who in the comics is from the future and a love interest of King the Conqueror. She also becomes a villain herself, donning the name The Temptress before settling on The Terminatrix. Loki attempts to blame the Avengers for all of this by saying he was aware of their time traveling, but Renslayer tells him that their time travel is okay because it was supposed to happen, according to the sacred timeline. But Loki escaping was not. Loki attempts to use his magic and the room laughs at him because it does not work in the TVA. He is found guilty and sentenced to be reset. This makes me wonder what the possible outcomes of the trial are. What is the best case scenario here? The only two possibilities are imprisonment or being reset, right? Unless you are lucky enough to be needed by the TVA. While Loki is being taken away, he says, "This is not how my story ends," with Renslayer telling him, "It's not your story, Mr. Laufeyson. It never was." And this will actually play into the story of this episode, and, just like before, possibly the series as a whole. Mobius jumps in and asks for custody of Loki. He informs Loki that time occurs differently in the TVA, and as they are walking, Loki looks out the window, giving us our first look at what appears to be the MCU version of the Null time zone, where the TVA is based out of in the comics. Mobius and Loki enter a time theater. Mobius explains that Loki was always on a set path. He also explains that he is an agent with the TVA that specializes in the pursuit of dangerous variants, and that Loki is basically a pussycat. What we have next is Mobius essentially giving Loki a therapy session. He asks Loki what he would do if they did allow him to go back to his timeline, and Loki said he would rule Midgard. So Mobius asks what next. Then he says Asgard, the Nine Realms, and eventually space. But then what? I mean, we've already seen what kind of ruler Loki is in Ragnarok, and he's not a very good one. Loki has shown his greatest hits, and Mobius wonders if Loki is just someone who likes to hurt people, just a murderer and nothing more. As during this we see that Loki is actually the real-life mystery criminal D.B. Cooper. And he explains that he did it because he lost a bet to Thor, which just shows how reckless Thor was before the first Thor movie. Loki tells Mobius that he knows what all this is, an illusion, a cruel elaborate trick by the weak to inspire fear. And Mobius tells Loki he's really good at doing bad things and then getting away. And he wants to know what makes Loki Loki. He then shows Loki his future, his capture, his imprisonment, and the fact that he is inadvertently responsible for his mother's death. This causes Loki to lash out, and Mobius hits him with the hard truth. He was never meant to be King Loki. He was meant to cause pain and suffering, so others can achieve the best versions of themselves. Loki is essentially a jobber, an enhancement talent, and that is a hard pill to swallow for the god of mischief. Hunter B-15 comes and pulls Mobius out and tells him that they lost another unit, and she wants Loki erased. Mobius goes back to the time theater, and Loki has escaped and taken the time twister with him. Loki finds the desk attendant from the beginning, whose name is Casey, and threatens him for the Tesseract. He pulls it out of his cart drawer and gives it to Loki, and Loki is shocked to see what else is in the drawer. Dozens of Infinity Stones, space, time, reality, power, and what appears to be Soul Stones. Casey informs him that they get a lot of those here, and that some people here use them as paperweights. And later in the credits we actually do see a yellow Mind Stone being used as a paperweight. This is shocking to us as the audience and Loki, because as far as we were aware, up until this point, these objects were the most powerful in the universe. To the point where if they are removed from a universe, it becomes unstable, and now they're being used as paperweights. In the comics, the Infinity Stones are unable to work outside of their home universe. So if the TVA exists in the null time zone in the MCU, like in the comics, then that would explain why they don't work, because it exists outside of time, and in turn, their home universe. This experience has humbled Loki, and he wonders if the TVA is truly the greatest power in the universe. But before he has a chance to let that sink in, Hunter B-15 rushes at him, and he uses the time twister to escape, which causes her to erase Casey's cart. showing us that B-15 was just going to reset Loki without a second thought. Also, we see Loki pick up a time stone, but we never really see him put it down, do we? Is it possible that Loki might have pocketed it? Loki is back in the Time Theater and looks at his future. His mother's death, Odin calling him son, telling him that he loves him, and fighting side by side with his brother, Thor. He also views his death at the hands of Thanos. This scene is masterfully carried by Tom Hiddleston, who we get to see react to all of these moments in rapid succession, going from sadness to joy to anger, and then acceptance, as Loki laughs at his non-existent glorious purpose. An interesting thing to note is that when the reel ends, it says Loki Laufeyson, Earth 616. In the Marvel Multiverse, this is the designation for the Prime Marvel Comics universe. B-15 enters the room and they fight, with Loki able to get his collar off and put it on her, sending her away, but not before flinging her back and forth through time first. Mobius enters the room and Loki tells him he doesn't enjoy hurting people. It's part of the illusion. A weak, desperate trick to instill fear, and this echoes the statement about the TVA earlier. Mobius recruits Loki to help him track down the being that is killing Minutemen, who, Mobius reveals to Loki, is a variant of Loki himself. We then cut to a team of Minutemen responding to a Nexus event in 1858 Oklahoma, where they are ambushed by the variant Loki, who we only see in silhouette in this hooded outfit that obscures both shape and appearance. The variant kills them, takes their reset charge, and the episode ends. Now, here's the thing. If the Loki variant was played by Tom Hiddleston, we would have seen their face at the end of the episode. So that tells us that this is Loki in a different form, if it is actually Loki. For me, there could be two possibilities. Either King Loki, the evil older Loki from Marvel Comics, or, and I'm almost certain that this is going to be the reveal, it is going to be Sophia DiMartino as Lady Loki. The only question left is, where is this Loki from, and why are they waging war with the TVA? Also, could we be getting a twist on the Council of Kings, and during the series we're going to get a Council of Lokis? I think it's very possible that before the series is over, we see more than a few variations of Loki, including Kid Loki and King Loki. Also, if we go by the history of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, we are basically taught not to trust large bureaucracies. We have seen nefarious intentions in both Sword and Shield, and something fishy is going on at the TVA. I do not think the organization as a whole is bad, but I do believe that maybe people or parties in the TVA are doing things that are not on the up and up. We already see that they don't really care about life, because we see Minutemen erase people with no hesitation, and we never do see what these reset charges do. With them being such a big plot point, it is interesting that we don't know exactly what they do. Is it possible they are violently destroying these timelines as they are resetting them, or maybe something more? Maybe these timelines are meant to exist. This episode also tells us there is no multiverse, but with things like What If, Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, and Spider-Man No Way Home on the horizon, this is either a lie by the TVA, or a new multiverse is going to be born into existence by the end of this series. However, we're just going to have to wait and see what comes next before we know for sure. I think one of the main themes of this series is going to be free will, and I think as this series goes on, we're going to see that Loki actually does have a purpose to play, and that not everything is predestined, and that we do have choices in life. Make sure to baton smack that like button, and comment below what you thought of the episode, and where you think this show is headed. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell to catch all of our new shows coming up. And until next time, guys, I will catch you later.